very warm welcome. Good morning. I hope you started very well into your second day at this year's Paris Peace Forum. This session is titled A Mine of Sustainable Initiatives for a Just Environmental Transition. Very warm welcome. My name is Marcus Herman Chen. I'm your moderator today. Two capacities I would like to mention. I'm the strategic advisor for Europe of Caixin, China's most influential financial media group and a very proud partner to the Paris Peace Forum. I'm currently the managing director of China Macro Group, a strategic advisory boutique focusing on China through the lens of market policy and international affairs. Some very quick logistics first. We have about 60 minutes. This session is live streamed on YouTube in English, so welcome also to the online participants. If you need translation for French to English, we will have two speakers, Edwige and Balbin, who will address the audience in French. Please use or get a headset. I would like to now briefly introduce my six fellow panelists. If I start clockwise from my perspective with Balbin Pascaline Makani Omgba is the president of the Association of Women in Mining in Africa, AWIMA, a network of African women in mining, oil and gas national associations. AWIMA was created in 2015 in Nairobi during the African Women Business Linkages Forum, organized by the African Union Commission. Then on her left, we have Mats Quist Fredriksen, Executive Director of the Arctic Economic Council located in Tromsø in Norway, a pan-Arctic independent business member organization. Welcome. And then on the left of Mats, we have Mirna. She's the Principal Program Manager with the Business and Security Division at the DCAF, the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance, focused on improving security, development, and respect for human rights in fragile contexts. Welcome. And then on this side of the table, we have Ashton Carter. He's the Executive Director of the Fair Cobalt Alliance, a multi-stakeholder action platform to help strengthen and professionalize DRC's artisanal cobalt mining sector and contribute to local economic development at large. On the left of Ashton, we have Edwige Chishimbi with International Alert as an advocacy, gender and communication officer. International Alert is a global peace-building charity focused on solving the root causes of conflict with people from across divides. And then finally, we have Fabien Mayani. He's the Director of Extractive Industries Governance Program at the Cotter Center of DRC, which has been consistently active in the DRC since 2006, working to promote democratic governance and protect human rights. So welcome all to the Paris Peace Forum, and thank you very much for sharing your expertise in advance. We have, if you note, and you will note that throughout the discussion, we have quite a strong focus on the DRC. I think Mats will bring in another region of the planet, the Arctic, so we're very curious also to hear your perspectives. I also want to highlight that there are 4 projects featured of the colleagues here outside in the forum. Maybe you have visited them already. In terms of framing, what is important to me is yesterday we had a session called Fostering Global Cooperation on Responsible Critical Minerals. Some of you or many of you may have been there. It was moderated by Justine West, the founder and the DG of the Paris Peace Forum. I think that was primarily covering the macro discussion. What we want to achieve today with our 6 panelists is basically zooming into the local context and understand the factors at play, the challenges, the issues that are actually important from a producing country perspective, and to ensure that the mining of these crucial minerals is responsible and respectful of the rights of the affected communities for a just environmental transition as the large brackets that we are all under. What I will do, just that you are aware, I'll ask three questions to my colleagues. First will be to ask them for a brief elaboration of their organization and the link to minerals, and also how they define success. I think that's important to understand. And then the second one will be to get their analysis of the local context so that we can all learn in how to look at the local context, building on the session we had yesterday. And then finally, we'll dive into some case studies where you can give examples. That's how we are planning to do the session. Exactly. I'm also going to set aside time, of course, for questions from the audience. So we all look very much forward to having your engagement in this session. So having said this, thank you very much for bearing with my introduction remarks. I would like to hand over the first word to Balbine, to my left, and ask her to introduce her organization and role. Thank you very much, Balbine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like you say in the beginning of the GS panel, I will do it in French. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for allowing me to be with you today and share with you information about the organization that I'm leading, the Association of Women in Mining in Africa. You explained when it was created, so we are the women in the mining industry, so we are connected to minerals as well. AWIMA has been working with the EU on a project to build a partnership between the EU and the African Union. In this respect, as the leader of AWIMA, one of the components, we collected information about the mining industry in Africa. The report is available on the EU's website. The Association of Women in Mining in Africa has four types of members: mining artisans, women entrepreneurs, staff, women in mining as well. So you find in our association women that are directly involved in the mining sector in Africa. So in some African countries, you know that minerals are exploited as a craft. So we work with these women who work in these crafts. The women in our association are entrepreneurs that have mining rights on critical minerals. They are professionals that work in mining companies as well. And the fourth type of person is women that are directly impacted by the mining of critical minerals. We have carried out a study on critical minerals, and we work on a daily basis on these types of minerals. Thank you very much.
The fact that you can speak to your members, artisanals, entrepreneurs, professionals, and community-based colleagues, you can take us very close to the context that we're trying to understand. I would like to hand over to Mats. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Arctic Economic Council, as you said, I'm probably the odd one on this panel, but just a quick introduction to all of you. The Arctic region, vast region, but 4 million people live there. And for many years, we've been an exporting region. So we are a business membership organization. We represent companies in 11 different countries, all 8 Arctic states. And what we export our region is fish to feed the world, is energy, traditionally hydrocarbons, but in the future hydrogen, and then mining products. For many years, the region has been, one of the most exciting places for mining. So you got Finland, you got Canada, you got Alaska that has very large established projects. And then you got places like Greenland that is where it's a 100% indigenous government that is fighting to try to attract more mining there. But it's a massive challenge because no one really understands what the Arctic is. So what we're trying in the Arctic Economic Council is really to build trust and to communicate about the opportunities in the Arctic. So when it comes to what is success, and when you look in the Arctic, we always say we have 4 million people in a fragile environment. So when you do business there, it has to happen with trust, because business happens at the speed of trust. Is the fastest way to do business. And also when it comes to mining, without the trust, then we lose that. And that is especially clear in the Arctic region. So that's a part of what Arctic Economic Council is doing, trying to create trust and get stakeholders at the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mats. I think the fact that you mentioned Greenland with an indigenous context, that will be something we can also compare then maybe in other geographies. Thank you. I would like to hand over to Mirna.
Thank you, Marcus, and good morning, everyone. My name is Mirna Ajami, and I'm with DCAF, and my organization in Geneva has nothing to do with coffee, but the original acronym came from our name, which was the Geneva Center for the Democratic Control of Armed Forces. But when we turned 20 several years ago, we changed our name, though keeping our acronym, to the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance. And the majority of my colleagues within DCAF focus on traditional security sector reform and governance defense initiatives, working with Army, police, intelligence, justice institutions. And I'm with the Business and Security Division. And I was very pleased to be here today that many people come up and said, I know DCAF, but I didn't know that you work on private sector issues in the Business and Security Division. And within our division, we have two program areas. My colleagues focus on oversight and regulation of the private security sector, and I'm the program lead for the business security and human rights. I manage a very modest fund, primarily with funds from the UK, Switzerland, and the Netherlands, to funnel projects to support local civil society organizations. And the framework that we use is the voluntary principles on security and human rights, which I'll come to speak to later. We have our program here featured on the DRC because of cobalt, because of the link with critical minerals there. But we also work in the oil and gas sector, and we have projects elsewhere in Africa, Nigeria, and Mozambique, and in Latin America as well, in Colombia and Peru. Thank you.
Thank you, Myrna. I'll directly hand over to Ashton, if you can take over.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm Ashton Stewart-Carter. I'm the Executive Director of the FCA, the Fair Cobalt Alliance, and also the CEO of the Impact Facility for Sustainable Mining Communities, which manages the Fair Cobalt Alliance. So we established the Impact Facility for Sustainable Mining Communities about 7 years ago, after 20 years of working in sustainability and mining, really with the purpose to see how we could convert mineral wealth into community prosperity, because we saw an extraordinary opportunity, or I've seen an extraordinary opportunity over the last 25 years to uplift communities around mineral development, when hitherto they'd been very much overlooked. So with one of our programs is the Fair Cobalt Alliance. I'm Executive Director of that, and that's where we work in the DRC, and I hope to talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But we also work in gold in the Lake Victoria region and in urban mining in West Africa and in other minerals around the world. So for us, across all those programs, really the success of our programs is that we can demonstrate that artisanal miners in particular, but not only, can live better through being legitimate participants in the transition to cleaner, fairer energy generation.
Thank you, Ash. Thank you, Ashton. You said mineral wealth into community prosperity, right? That sticks. Thank you so much. I would hand over to Edwige. So please, thank you. Thank you.
So I'm Edwige Chishimbi. I work for International Alert, and I'm in charge of advocacy, communicacy, and gender. We are based in DRC, in South Kivu. So the Manteneo project is implemented by a consortium of organizations, national organizations, justice organization in particular, the Observatory for Governance as well, that is working in South Kivu. There are 3 international organizations as well involved: International Alert, which is leading the consortium, Justice Plus, and another organization that works on peace. We are funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. It's a 4-year project. We are reaching the end of the project that will close at the end of December, but we hope to have other opportunities in this field. It's a project that is implemented in the mining areas of DRC, conflict areas as well, of course, and it is a project that is implemented in conflict areas and around the areas where there are mining conflicts. We also work in mining craft and strategic mines, tin, tantal, and tungsten. and gold, the 3 T's and gold. The projects combine 2 approaches, peace building and conflict resolution, improvement of governance, of mining governance, and for this approach on improving governance, mining governance, we support directors of mines at national and regional level, and we support them to comply with international regulations when it comes to exploitation and of mines and trade as well. And we try to improve the legislation and to enforce clean mining. We help local communities, local players to analyze and settle conflicts between communities.
Thank you very much, Edwige. You described the work that you do, including the outreach and the policy analysis. I'll be curious to learn more of how that can support your organization's goal. I've been reminded that we should all, including myself, speak more slowly for the translation. So I'll just, that everyone is aware. And then just to close the first round, I would like to hand over to Fabien. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me here. My name is Fabien Mayani. I'm Program Director of Extractive Industry Governance for the Carter Center in the DRC. As you mentioned, the Carter Center is an NGO that is promoting peace, democracy, human rights, and health globally. And in DRC, as part of the Extractive Governance Program, we are working to advance transparency, accountability in the management of DRC natural resources to ensure that there is shared prosperity between DRC people and international companies that are coming in DRC to exploit and to export mineral for fitting into international global transition. We are doing this three key pillars, I can say. One pillar is to empower local people to better understand those problems and also to advocate for effective shared prosperity. As you know, DRC is home to huge natural resources, in particular critical minerals, cobalt, but the situation now, Congolese citizens are still poor. So we're working how to empower them to be able to advocate for shared prosperity. The second pillar relates to we are supporting and monitoring DRC government action to ensure that it manages well natural resources and in particular revenues, how many companies are paying revenues to the DRC government, how the DRC government is managing those resources. And the last pillar relates to international stakeholders. As you mentioned, today we have DRC cobalt, DRC copper, which are fitting into international global transition. But what I've seen that international stakeholders are not very more engaged in terms of setting up effective regulations to ensure responsible sourcing of critical mineral coming from DRC. And concretely what we are doing, we are advocating for transparency, for information disclosure, how to ensure that all information from the sector are available and accessible to citizens. Also, we are monitoring human rights issues, how to ensure that mining operations are not negatively impact communities, and also monitoring social projects of mining companies in terms of CSR, in terms of local content, what mining companies are doing. Also, we are monitoring revenue management, because as you know, how many companies are paying tax, how the US government is managing. And finally, we are supporting effective legal reform. Just as an example, in 2018, the DRC government revised the mining code. We have been pushing for that reform, and thanks to our joint advocacy effort, the DRC government revised that mining code that tried to, let's say, to address some of the problems we have in terms of governance. That I can say what's right. So thank you.
Thank you, Fabien. You also leave a keyword. You say you want to talk about effective shared prosperity. What I would like to do now, and I just want to recap briefly, if you look at those critical minerals that are shared, that are viewed as critical by EU, US, and China, if you compare their lists, it's graphite, nickel, lithium, cobalt, and rare earth. It's these five minerals. And we also see that all these five minerals, they all have a compounded annual growth rate, CAGR, of 10% projected demand growth over the next 10 years. So there is, from the consuming countries, there's a lot of demand pressure. And what I would like to do now with using your expertise and your vantage points is just provide the analysis for the audience to understand what does that mean locally. Now, we have understood your organizations and your missions. Now, if you can take us into the local context and help us analyze how can we balance that under the broader umbrella, as we said, of fair green transition. I would, again, if we go with Balbin, after this round, you can already prepare. I would like to take your questions for a first round. So please, Balbin, thank you very much.
Okay, merci beaucoup, Marcus.
Thank you very much, Marcus. I will be talking about the local context, but the local context actually is continental because we are a continental association, and so we can only talk about this globally in an overall sense. As you said, the people in our panel are concentrating on all of this. I'd like to start by talking about strategy, the strategy of the critical minerals for the African Union. The African Union has drafted, in cooperation with other players, a strategy. So I think that we can start by trying to understand what Africa's expectations are. This strategy says that we want an Africa that creates value chains for technology and sustainable development to improve the living conditions of our local populations. And so there are three main things. There's the chain of value, there's industrialization, and there's also the improvement of living conditions for our populations who are impacted and who live, whose lifestyles are based on those critical minerals. Africa has not been just sitting around waiting. We've been making suggestions, but there are a lot of challenges involved. We can try to improve living conditions, we can industrialize, but we all know that all of this has a cost. You have to find the resources to implement this, and we have to know where to look for those resources. And the lives of the locals have to be represented by local and national governments. But we also have hope that this can be done because we know that there is a great demand for minerals, and we can always catch up through measures to help the populations. So the challenges are tremendous, it's true, but we also know that we have to share. And that's why we believe that partnerships can work, whether they be regional or local partnerships. Here I'm talking about, when I talk about regional partnerships, you know that mines don't respect borders. The mines can be trans-border. But we can work together. For example, 3 countries sharing a single mine. So we can go and develop those partnerships. And in other areas, for example, in Morocco, they have done a lot of research on looking into batteries in order to reinforce the capacities of other states to produce those batteries. We also look at aspects that
les moyens ensemble en tant que pays. Parce que
of resource sharing between countries.
L'exploitation minière.
Some projects are held back because they don't have the necessary energy, but we also know that there are neighboring countries who may have an excess of energy and could share. So the first question is to figure out how African countries can pool their resources. Now, locally speaking, you know that we've always assumed that things should be done by major mining companies, but I also help small companies, small associations that work in gold mining, and now they're working in lithium. And these women have been working to mine gold, and we need to find the way to reinforce their capacity so that they can also go into mining lithium and maybe managing waste as well. So at the local level, communities must not be spectators. We have to all be major actors, and to be actors, we have to help the communities. The mines are a resource like agriculture, and you can't just wait until your neighbor comes and gives you food. You have to cultivate your own crops in order to eat. And the mines are a similar resource that must be cultivated. And so we have to create partnerships between local communities and companies. And I think that would also help to improve living conditions and help the local communities to take advantage of the work done in the mines. These minerals have been exploited for many, many years, and we have to find a way for the local communities to take advantage of that as well, and do that through the creation of partnerships.
I think I hear at least 3 points. Basically, when you talk about industrialization and value chain, it's actually just about local value added, right? To keep it in your country, and then to support that, you talked about governance, and then finally you went to the community level to actually look at it, the most immediately impacted people. So with this, I would like to turn to Mats to share your analysis. Thank you.
No, and a lot of it is actually similar to the previous speaker. So let me just take you to the Arctic again briefly on a macro level. So it's a vast area. Primarily, a lot of it is run on renewable energy. So I have zero energy cost. We heat up the pavements in where I live in the Arctic to melt the snow, but we do that with green energy. So just imagine you live in a place that is vast. Green energy, 30% of Norway is within the Arctic. But then it's also, most importantly, a home to 4 million people, from where 10% are indigenous peoples. So this is like the overall. And then you all know when you buy a house, location, location, location. We are located with good infrastructures quite often in some places, definitely with good minerals. All the minerals you mentioned are in the Arctic region. All transition minerals you will find in the Arctic region, and close to the markets, close to the EU markets, close to the US markets, close to China when you look to minerals in Russia. And then it's very strong governance. We heard from all the speakers the importance of strong governance and its strong enforcement. But this comes with a premium. You know, the premium that customers might not be willing to pay. So this is one of the challenges that we are facing, is that yes, we can do mining with strong governance, strong enforcement in, close to the markets, but it comes with a premium, it comes with an extra cost. Number 2 challenge we have is what we call the Arctic resource paradox, which I think many of the speakers can relate to, which is where the money are, or where the minerals are, is not where the money necessarily stays. So that's because we will never have the processing capabilities in the Arctic region. Processing will take place elsewhere, but that's also where the value is. So that's one challenge we have. Then we have a challenge that, I mean, the previous speaker mentioned the role of women. Workforce is a massive challenge. When you are in a region with 4 million people and the mining is still considered a dirty and dangerous and dull job, even though it's not, but that's a massive challenge, is to recruit enough people, and that goes for men and for women. And then finally, and this is also similar to the previous speakers, you know, we need to attract investments, and investments that benefit local communities. We live in this world of post-truth, of polarization, of populism, and this is we also see in the Arctic. So there's a lot of misunderstandings of what the Arctic is. That is this pristine landscape of polar bears. It's also beautiful. We also have polar bears, but it's so much more than that. And we're struggling with that, which also means that we are not always invited to the table because people don't see the Arctic as a place of a home for people. And that goes for indigenous communities as well. So we are trying to get at the table, because if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And we are definitely feeling that quite often when it comes to the Arctic region. So because we are not that big, we're not that many, and we're in a remote area, that can be a challenge. Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up question, because you talked about the premium that you have operating in this environment. Is there any policy intervention into your context that basically is trying to drive down the premium?
I mean, so I think actually the IRA is a good example of something that can drive down the premium. So the US government has actually invested in transition minerals in Canada and in Alaska. And so that has driven down the price a little bit, because governments need to go in and take the first risk quite often. We also saw it with a lot of defense investments. So it's also Department of Defense is doing a lot of investments. And the thing is, when you work in the Arctic, you need to build all the infrastructures in some places where the mining sites are. So if governments goes in there, that will also lower the cost of the minerals getting out there. That's often the case of Greenland, for example. So if the government, whatever government entity can go in and build the deep sea port, then the mining company will come in there and the business case will be much better. So yes, we see it a little bit, but we see it definitely as a barrier.
Great, there may be later more questions. Please, Mirna, and also feel free to just react to what your co-panelists are saying. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. I think from DCAF, from the panelists, we're intervening on the unique issues of security and human rights most directly. And just from the question of investment, trying to attract investment, of course, for investment, companies want to know that their operations are secure. And natural resources are also a main source of revenue for the government. So by their very nature, critical minerals, strategic minerals, all natural resources are a highly securitized industry. And so the question is how to balance the needs for security for the investments and the operations alongside the needs for human rights protections and securities of the communities that live outside the extractive operations. And that's where DCAF is intervening along the very same lines that Balbine was saying in terms of looking at local support, looking at community support, and this international framework that I mentioned earlier, the voluntary principles on security and human rights, is at once a global multi-stakeholder initiative, but it was in fact the first standard, industry standard on business and human rights. It predated the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. It emerged from the extractive industries because the companies in these industries said, we need to find a way that in a tripartite level between governments, private sector, and civil society, we can push each other. How can we find alliances actually between private sector and communities for pushing the governments to respect their obligation to protect human rights of peoples, of their citizens, of their countries? How can governments and civil societies also work together to hold private sector and companies to account, to improve their policies and practices, to respect human rights? And the role of civil society, you know, there are different civil society organizations that wear different hats. Name and shame organizations have a role to play, but many of the organizations that we work with are open to dialogue. They see that dialogue is the only way to improve the security of the communities and human rights protections. So going forward, the way that we see the projects that we're here, happy to talk about it more later in the DRC and elsewhere, is how to set up these multipartite dialogue structures at the national level, at the local level. How can we use regulation regulations that are popping up everywhere and putting pressures on companies to increase and improve their due diligence, but to use really these hands-on, local-based, multi-stakeholder dialogue structures to give human rights due diligence meaning with local knowledge and local dialogue to find joint solutions on the ground.
Thank you, Mirna. If we add 3 more perspectives, so we have the substance, please, Ashton.
So let me focus on our work with the Fair Cobalt Alliance in the DRC. So many of you will know, I'm sure, that cobalt has been associated with dire working conditions at artisanal mining sites, and that is the focus of the Fair Cobalt Alliance, is on the artisanal sector. So back in 2016, Amnesty International and subsequent publications since have pointed out the cases of child labour and also health and safety on these mine sites. And these conditions can't be overstated. They're very serious, and we should be doing something about it. Nevertheless, this perspective on the sector has led to the avoidance of the sector. In fact, the whole sector has been labelled a risk, despite the efforts of the OECD to say engage. The interpretation of the supply chain is saying this is, from a reputation point of view, too difficult, and we need to stay away from it. This doesn't make sense. Why doesn't it make sense? Because the opportunities from small-scale mining, their contribution is large, and the opportunity for development is great. If you consider cobalt by itself, 70% is mined in the DRC, and about 10 to 20% of that comes from artisanal miners. So that's about 10,000 tons a year. That's about $1 billion industry, and that goes directly into the EV battery supply chain. And in terms of how that translates into jobs, that's 150 to 250,000 men and women, and about half are women who work in these sectors. In the DRC, that's probably coming up to 500,000 who work in artisanal mining across the different sectors. And this isn't cobalt only. Tin is 40% artisanal mining. Gold is 20% artisanal mining. Gemstones are probably 90% artisanal mining. So artisanal mining is here to stay, because this is a livelihood which, by the way, pays better than agriculture or teaching, and so it's seen as an opportunity. So what do we do about it? What's stopping us from turning this mineral wealth into community prosperity? Well, we need to look at this as though these are businesses, as my colleagues on a panel from the DRC have already said, and businesses need factors of production. They need to have access to capacity, they need technical assistance, they need access to fair markets, and they need access to capital and equipment. And this is what we go about trying to do, and we can talk a little bit about that later. But because of this reputation risk, it doesn't seem to be forthcoming. And also, there's a bit of a Mexican standoff who should take the first step in enabling these factors of production to be made available and accessible to these stakeholders. Finally, there's kind of 3 approaches then that we need to put in place in order to facilitate this enabling environment, and I think this is where we'll find the themes, Marcus. One is that we need to take a landscape or an ecosystem approach, and by that I mean we tend to focus only on the mine site, so on the boundaries of the mine and inside the fence. You know, consider a mine being one part of an economic ecosystem, and how we can leverage that ecosystem for greater development prosperity. If you look at the multiplier effect of mining compared to agriculture, it exceeds it by several folds. It's about 24%. We also need to look at the multi-stakeholder approach. This is a common problem, so that requires a collective solution. Back to the Mexican standoff, we can't point at others and ask them to solve the whole problem. So that is what we need to do. And then we need to sort of look at the legitimacy of this. This is legitimacy in terms of hard regulations from the government approval and recognition, but also from downstream. So we heard mention of standards. Standards tend to lean towards excluding groups and communities they don't understand. We need to turn that around as well.
Thanks, Ashton. Just one very brief follow-up. When you say economic ecosystem approach, which actor comes to your mind that is already most credible in doing it, or it is already adopting that kind of approach?
Well, this is the approach we're piloting the Fair Cobalt Alliance. So we don't just look at the mine sites, we also look at economic resilience in the communities as well. And so what you need to start looking at is the ancillary and the auxiliary businesses around there and see how to do it. And so we can talk about that, but we call it a sustainable mineral-rich landscape approach, where you can crowd in different funders to if you think about mining, it's a very high wealth generating intensive activity. If you look at agriculture, it's an extensive activity and low wealth generating. So the question we should be asking is, why on earth aren't we grasping that opportunity for community prosperity from the wealth that minerals generate?
Thank you very much. Over to Edwige for sharing your analysis.
Moi, je voudrais insister beaucoup plus sur l'importance de...
I'd really like to insist on the importance of making sure that the communities benefit from the mining activity in their communities. It's very important, especially today, because we've realized that a large number of people make a living from artisanal mining. The World Bank thinks that in DRC, 2.5 million people make a living from artisanal mining. And if you add up the numbers for an average family in Congo, you have 6 people in each family. It represents 15 million people that make a living from artisanal mining, in fact. So it is important that the profits made should benefit the communities, because we realize that the communities produce, but the profits are for the economic operators, in particular gold exporters. So it's a very relevant issue for us today. It is important to see how these communities who are working hard in artisanal mining can benefit as well, somehow, of all this business. A major advantage for the community should be about taxes. The taxes that will be paid to the communities to support development projects in these communities. Because the communities in which minerals are mined, they lack infrastructure, roads, health infrastructure, social infrastructure, and this is not acceptable. So we need to work a lot more on all these issues, because they are extremely relevant and they require deep thinking from all the stakeholders, all the players in the mining sector, in the mining industry. So the main point is to improve the living conditions in the communities. And it can be done through the transformation of the supply chain and by the governments levying taxes. So the players must support the governments. And the principles, the international principles should be better complied with, the principles that regulate mining. And the government should be encouraged to implement the mining regulations. Regarding mining projects, we help the authorities in Congo to make taxes more transparent, and we hope to focus much more on working with local administrations and communities in the future to demand that the funds and tax collection should benefit much more to the development of communities, because the situation has really become unacceptable. If you see the conditions in which these communities live in, with the huge income that comes from their mines, it's not normal. It's not fair. So we need to wake up, and we need to work together on these issues. Thank you. And the Medina project is trying to work on this slowly, step by step. And we are beginning to obtain results from the government, but also with local players. And we hope that things will improve even more. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Edwige. A lot of persistence in your work. Let's close off with Fabien, and then we open for Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again for. I think one of the key issues we have to talk about is how to ensure just transition through critical minerals. Because from our perspective, that is the key problem we have, the key issue we have to address. And according to what we're seeing in DRC, one of the key challenges we have is how to get equitable deals between producing countries, in particular DRC, and international companies. That is a problem. Because just an example for DRC, for example, we have been analyzing some mining contracts, and we try to estimate what DRC is losing in terms of tax evasion, in terms of corruption, because from the beginning, mining deals have been signed in a way that they are not benefiting local people. That is one key issue I would like to raise here. How to ensure that mining projects have, like she said, local value addition. How to ensure that? Because that is the key issues we have to discuss. How to ensure that we have that, as I said, shared value, shared prosperity between local people and international stakeholders. Another key issue is related to skill and technology transfer. I know that over the past, what China did, China signed agreement with European countries in which you have provisions that required skill transfer for local people. But what we're seeing today, no local, let's say, capacitation in terms of how to have local people able themselves to be engaged. Another issue we have and a challenge in the field is issue relating to human rights protection. When mining operations are deployed, we have problems in terms of how communities are protected. We have been carrying out some human rights impact assessment case studies. We have seen, for example, forced evictions of people, of communities. We have environmental degradation. You have health concerns for communities. So we have to ensure that all those issues are taken into account. And I would like to finalize with multi-stakeholder approaches. We believe that that is one way we can improve things. And we believe that international stakeholders, in particular, and the users, consumers, also parent companies, have a key role to play on that. How to ensure that all the regulations are somehow coordinated, because today, what we have, we have some international regulation, but according to our perspective, they are fragmented regulations. You have EU with regulation, you have China, you have United States of America, and other countries. So in the field, those regulations are not very effective. So we need a kind of coordinated framework, a kind of coordinated agenda on how to ensure responsible sourcing of critical minerals, to ensure that we have a just transition that both benefits all the planet to tackle climate change problems, but also that critical minerals, where they are mined, people also get benefit from the exploitation of those resources. That I want to mention. Yeah.
Thank you, Fabian. Equitable deals, human rights protection, skills, tech transfer, multi-stakeholder. I have a question, but basically also linking to what Mirna says about the voluntary principles, because just to understand how companies really interact with these local contexts, but I'll pause for now. So please, do we have a microphone in the room? Is there a microphone? Yes, please, there's 2 questions here. Oh, you can speak, you can use directly the one on the table. Thank you.
Yeah, should I start? I'm Christian from GIZ. And first of all, I want to thank the panelists. I very much enjoyed the inputs, particularly Fabien from the DRC, because I worked there also for some time on the EITI. And I have actually 2 quick questions. The first one is, Myrna, you also mentioned the use of multi-stakeholder initiatives as one approach in improving resource governance. And I think that's also our experience. There is quite a lot of these initiatives now. But there's also sometimes quite a lot of frustrations of people being involved there because they are consulted and they are participating, and afterwards there's no follow-up or they're even threatened in these initiatives. And from your experience, what would you say are the enabling factors for these multi-stakeholder initiatives to achieve any impact beyond just being a nice conversation, but actually change something? And the second question is to Mr. Stewart-Carter. I don't know, that's maybe have there ever been companies that you approached joining the Fair Cobalt initiative and that refused? And I would be interested in their arguments and how you reacted. So because you made a very clear business case, for us it seems to be very clear that it's in the interest of private sector to adhere to the principles that you formulated. But maybe there are also companies with a different view, and I would be interested how you deal with them and what the arguments there are. Thank you very much.
Maybe Ashton first, and then everyone can think about the stakeholder question, and then someone can respond to that.
Yeah, and I'll include that in my response as well. So the Fair Cobalt Alliance is the only multi-stakeholder initiative doing what we're doing, working with artisanal miners. So we are about 26, 28 organizations, both from the upstream, so Glencore, CMOC, Managem, for example, are members, and the downstream, so Google, Tesla, Signify, Fairphone, and also from the third sector, so Save the Children and ARM and the Center for Children's Rights, and so on. So, I mean, to me, and I've been doing multi-stakeholder initiatives since about 2000, fun enough, and we manage in another context about 3 of these at the moment. And the one thing which keeps them together is you have to have a central goal and give up your own agendas. That's simply it. And then rules. In terms of what are the, you know, I guess I should say, before I answer your question directly, there has been a shift just in the last kind of, we've been going 3.5, 4 years. There's been a shift in the last year about people joining. And I think what has happened is a couple of things. One is that previously you were required as a downstream company, if you're talking about downstream, to do due diligence, so you had to monitor. But beyond that, there weren't very many consequences. Now that this has changed, and if you're a downstream company, you have a rebuttable presumption, and you have to do your where the actual material comes from and demonstrate that you're doing something about it. So what can you actually do about it if you can't put in place a transparent thing? And so that's where we come in. One of the things we look at is what we call responsible mineral credits, where you can actually contribute to a solution upstream by working downstream. So to answer the question directly, one of the things people say is, how can we possibly engage if we can't string together a direct thing? Another one is purely reputation. And so you'll get some companies who say, we're going to spend all our money to prove that we don't get it from a certain place, which we believe isn't possible, and much better to say, let's solve the problem. So that's the switch we've got to have, is we want to be part of a solution rather than try and avoid the problem. Another one is competition, right? There's a lot of, you know, some of these companies are managing 50 to 80 different material supply chains, and they don't know what to do about all of them all at once. So we need a national focus. And our argument to that is cobalt is all in pretty much in one place, maybe 2 if Indonesia comes on stream. And the artisanal cobalt, it's all in one province. So you can put a circle around that on the Google map, and if you have collective power, you can actually solve this problem, and we know how to solve it. So the question is, we need organizations like you to transmit that message and say, get behind something which we can actually solve.
Thank you. Did anyone want to add very briefly on the multi-segment? Yes, Mirna?
Yeah, Christian, you asked about the enabling factors for success. For me, it's both a mix of the top down. For me, we're the international organizations represented here, but we work with local Congolese civil society organizations and wherever else that we work. And I'd say the legitimacy of and trust in those local actors who lead those conversations at the local level are an absolute key, to any progress and success and results at the local level. When you combine that with the multi-stakeholder approach, there's also some pressure for monitoring from the top, be it from corporate HQ, who's also saying to their security and their human rights or social performance people, you need to go and engage with those people because this is part of our obligations in this multi-stakeholder initiative that oftentimes many company people at the local level don't know of because they don't participate in the international discussions. You can have, a recipe for local success. I think the key problem that we're really facing is the scaling up. This is the real challenge for the transition, is the scaling up of where all of us have localized success in the projects that we do, but how do we scale this up?
Thank you, Myrna. Peter, you had a question.
Well, given the time, I'll turn my question into an invitation, because we've recently, the European Union and its member states, signed a strategic partnership with the DRC and also one with Zambia, so we can bring in a regional approach, as you were saying. And we're about to sign one also with Greenland in a few weeks' time. And in both of these partnerships, we have an operational roadmap. So my invitation is, help us from the multi-stakeholder perspective to flesh out that operational roadmap, those operational roadmaps, in a way that helps those countries and those communities achieve their objectives. You need to tell us what you want to do and how we can help you do that, whether it be about responsible sourcing, transparency, community involvement, or the in-country added value. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We still have time for another question, if there's a question in the room. Yeah, please.
Thank you all. Turn it on. Stand. Okay, sorry. Thank you all so much for your comments, your participation. I really learned a lot. My name is Christian Morpinski. I'm with the Carter Center's Human Rights Program. My question would be, recognizing the prevalence of artisanal and small-scale mining, as our colleague over here mentioned, it's growing. My question would be, what efforts can the international community do, or what role can the international community play in formalization efforts? Because we recognize also that formalization is key to reducing human rights violations, reducing conflict between large-scale mining operations and artisanal small-scale mining operations. And with minimal ZEAs and much more operations than places, what can we do to make that happen? Thank you.
Who would like to take a stab?
So artisanal mining will grow and ebb depending on the price. So in fact, there's a lower price in cobalt, so there's fewer artisanal miners than there were a year ago. But over the long term, yes, we believe that it will continue. The formalization is absolutely key, and you're talking about the DRC. So the DRC government has actually got a strategic plan, which it says it's going to move towards. So that is in place. And they have set up a kind of a local trading center, which has been there for a few years. So I think it's continually, so what can the international community do is continue to encourage the DRC government that this is the right thing to do, and then providing the enabling funds and technical transfer that they can actually see how to do it, because there are examples elsewhere, Tanzania, Peru, Colombia, where this is actually functioning. But I defer to my friends from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Thank you. Yes, so very quick.
Super quick, but it was to your question as well. A coalition of actors, corporates and a multinational corporate, civil society in the DRC, worked with the DRC government, and the DRC government has been accepted in 2023 as a new engaged government in this multi-stakeholder initiative, the voluntary principles on security and human rights. And Ashton, I fully agree there's a lot that needs to be done still in terms of encouraging the government at the diplomatic level to ensure that they have uphold their own, implement the laws that look perfect on the books and respect their human rights obligations.
Thank you, Mirna. We have Balbin with the last comment. We started 3 minutes late, so we can add a few minutes.
Oui, je voulais juste dire que l'artisanat minier est une activité locale. Donc, cette activité...
Artisanal mining is a local activity, and it should be strengthened up in the countries themselves at national level. And as you said earlier on, there are success stories in the countries, and what the countries must do is to organize this business, this activity, and that that artisanal mining's perceptions change. It's a problem of perception, because this business just helps the population make a living. It must be better regulated.
Value added local via equitable deals to security and human rights. We heard a lot of different perspectives. I would like to thank the panelists that they come to the table, name issues, and reach out in a multi-stakeholder way for solutions in the spirit of the Paris Peace Forum. So please join me in thanking our panelists.